Hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck, the Lower Decks edition. I am Michael, your host. Today, we are beginning our discussion on Season 5, Episodes 1 and 2, the final season of Lower Decks. And in the studio with me is David. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everybody.
Can you believe that we're already 5 years into this show? David, where does time go?
I know.
Doesn't it seem like this show just premiered?
It does. And that's the thing that sucks nowadays is kind of like, like me and you have gone back and forth about how we wish our Star Trek series could have like longer and longer series. But the fact of the matter is they have a strategy that basically says, oh, no, we're going to do these shortened series where it's like 10 episodes, 8 episodes.
Well, it's like what we've talked about when it comes to Strange New Worlds as well as Discovery. It seems strange for a show to end. Let's just tackle Discovery first. Even though I've enjoyed Star Trek Discovery through the years, it didn't feel right for it to end because I don't feel like we ever had fully enough time with the cast. And that has to do less with the episode or the seasons, and it has everything to do with the episode order per season. And the same thing now applies with Lower Decks.
Yeah.
We're 5 seasons in, and I think part of the reason why I'm like, wow, already is because there's only 10 episodes a season. That's nothing, David. 50 episodes, that's 2 seasons. That's 1 3/4 of a Next Generation season.
And the thing is, I like to some degree this type of format because you have the ability in those series to make every moment count, and you have those hilarious moments that stick with you as a fan because we don't have like this big gap where you might forget something. Starting from it's like going back to my rewatches. I've now started rewatching a lot of Picard, Discovery, Strange New Worlds now, and Lower Decks, and just started now rewatching and going through like from season 1 to see everything, how everything's progressing. And the thing that has stuck out with me, particularly with Lower Decks, is like everything seems fast from between season 1 to season 3. Like you can immediately like binge watch and not feel like time has passed. And my brain just sticks to remembering iconic, quote unquote, iconic moments, like one of the things in Lower Decks that I still crack up at is the episode where they have the Enlightenment episode.
Yeah.
where they achieve enlightenment, and all of a sudden, you have Boimler see God.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It sticks with you, but it also basically makes me feel like we're not getting like a full story of all the crew.
No, we're not. That's where I am too, David. Without the episodic order that we used to have, for example, in Next Generation, we would not have the Galron Worf story arc.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the Wesley Crusher Traveler story arc. We wouldn't have the Data and Spot story arc, because for all intents and purposes, those are filler episodes. And I can keep naming numerous story arcs that added so much depth to characters and story and Star Trek mythology and cosmology that's just not there now because we have 10 episodes. It's the reason why Strange New Worlds ends the 2nd season, and we're like, well, what actually happened with these characters this year? We don't really know. Now, Lower Decks doesn't fall too far into that territory because it is a cartoon. It's mostly levity. It's low stakes. And because of that, I don't feel the same intensity, the same passion about there must be more episodes. However, it still felt. And when you look back at the 4 prior seasons, it does seem strange for a series that has been, for the most part, received critically well from fans and actual critics. A show that is top-notch in terms of comedy writing, It is a show that represents a true love of Star Trek. So it's doing everything right. And it's a shame that a show this well put together has to be put away indefinitely after
Yeah.
5 seasons. We're going to be given 50 episodes and we'll never see this show again. That's what's weird. With Next Generation, we have so many episodes that we can continue to go back to and celebrate. There's a library, there's a wealth of episodes that we can always go back to. With Lower Decks, and I'm saying this because I have recently gone back as well to start rewatching some of the newer stuff, and the rewatchability is very different than with old school Rick Berman, Roddenberry Star Trek. And it has nothing to do with quality. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I can watch 7 seasons of Picard, or I should say Next Generation, and it takes me 6 months because I watch 1 or 2 episodes a night.
Mm-hmm.
I can watch all of Discovery in a matter of months. It just goes by really quick. And when something goes by quick, you don't have that historical rapport that typically comes with things that we spend more time with. All right, so let's move into the episode here. So this is the final season of Lower Decks. We're going to be talking about and breaking down the final 2 episodes, or I should say the final 2 premiere episodes of Lower Decks ever, titled Dos Cerritos and Shades of Green. So overall, these premiere episodes have been well received, showcasing the show's strengths and marking a bittersweet moment as it enters its final season. 5 seasons is definitely notable, as we were saying in the streaming era. However, the show's consistent quality raises expectations. We want to see more. And that being said, David, I will say that if this season is written just as well as the prior seasons, I don't feel like it's going to be that difficult to say goodbye, meaning from a creative standpoint. I feel like they're going to be able to bring enough closure to our key characters, and that has a lot to do with the fact that Mike McMahon is a master character writer.
Yeah.
That's not the right way of saying that. That could be taken so many different ways. He's a master of writing and fleshing out character.
There you go.
He really is at a comedic level. I'm not quite sure at a dramatic level yet, but at a comedic level, he does extremely well.
Oh, absolutely. Because we've been going in nauseum about how his strength from shows like Rick and Morty and I can't think of the second one right now.
Solar Opposites.
Those shows, even though they're quote unquote children's cartoons, have such a depth when it comes to their characters, and he's able to actually make those characters have deep character arcs or story arcs and story growth.
They're comedic, but there's a lot of adult content that's relatable to the audience.
Yeah, there's a lot of adult concepts that kids can watch and go, oh, yeah, all the crazy and lunacy of Rick and Morty. But us as adults can watch and go, oh, okay, I like the story of how, they talk more of a dramatic concepts, especially with characters like Rick.
Yeah.
I mean, you get into some really dark territory with those characters. And that's the beauties that I was like hoping we would get with Lower Decks. And sure enough, the growth of Boimler and Mariner from day one, and this is just me restarting from season 1. It is amazing how these characters started off one way, and at the end of season 3, they're totally dealt with differently. And then when you get to the final season, even up to season 5, you open up and the characters feel so different than when they first started in season 1.
No, you're right. And I think that's part of what Mike McMahon's working towards. I think that's part of his strategy, to start off at a moment. I don't want to say it's deep introspection, but these 2 episodes were introspective.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of a man like Mike McMahon, who understands Star Trek. And it only would have worked better if you look at some of the core aspects that they used for this episode. For example, the alternate reality. The only way that could have worked better is if he actually went to the mirror universe. But setting that aside, the fact that he used an alternate reality to place up a mirror so our characters can immediately be understood
Yeah.
and understand the trajectory, because in a lot of ways, Dave, that alternate reality is very similar to the reality that the show takes place in the Prime universe. There are a lot of interesting things they were doing by simply introducing the alternate reality. And yes, that's kind of par for the course of Star Trek. Alternate realities is part of its or I should say some of its genre tropes, semantics at this point, conventions. But it was a smart way to remind the viewer what these characters are all about.
Yes.
Without retreading unnecessarily and having some fun while doing it. But really, the heart and soul of the 2-episode premiere, for the first time, it isn't Mariner and Boimler.
Yes.
They were a big part of it. They were the funny aspect. They were definitely those key aspects that we need because, for all intents and purposes, those are the two main characters.
Yeah.
Mariner is probably number one on that call sheet, the actor that plays Mariner.
Oh, absolutely.
But they opened up a little differently with this premiere, and they chose to focus on Davana, Tendi. And in doing so, we got the best 2 episodes ever for Tendi. Well, Tendi's had some great moments throughout, but I don't feel like we've actually sat down and had this big of an arc for her character.
Well,
before.
it's one of those things that I remember you even criticizing was the fact that for 5 seasons we've had really good storytelling with characters among the cast of the Cerritos. We've had really great stories of Rutherford.
Mm-hmm.
We've had great stories of Boimler, Mariner, and Tendi has had her moments, but Tendi is the one. I remember last season we were like going, not much happened with Tendi. All we really got was like, okay, she's gone from the show by the end of season 4.
Yeah, it was light.
And it was light.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like going, we really wish you could have done a little bit more with Tendi. And like in 2 episodes, they catch you up on this is what her story arc is really quickly.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is like, it goes to like what you were saying is like, it makes me think that if they were given at least a little more leeway with the amount of episodes they can do, imagine like what Mike McMahon could really do with some of these characters if he's able to, instead of have 10 episodes a season, if he were to have like 28 episodes a season, he would cover so much ground in character growth wise that 28 episodes at 5 seasons,
28 episodes. That's
God.
a lot for a cartoon, though.
I'm talking like old school
Yeah.
cartoons and
Yeah.
old school TV shows like TNG.
Yeah.
Where they had the 20, I think it was 21, 28.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's-
I understand your point, Dave. If he can cover this much ground and flesh out this much character,
If he was just
in
given
27 minutes roughly,
Yeah.
10 episodes at 30, let's say 25 to 30 minutes, 10 episode seasons. I mean, look at how much we do in fact know. Rather than looking at what we don't have,
Yeah.
we can look at what we have been
have.
given. And just in 4 seasons of 10 episodes per season, look how much we have learned about these characters. And these opening 2 episodes are a perfect example, a textbook example of Mike McMahon's ability to really move through narrative quickly and not in a fashion that feels rushed
Yes.
or lazy, but in a way that feels concise, narratively speaking. The audience is moving through the beats at a brisk pace, and we learn so much by the end. Even when it comes to, let's say, as silly as this is, but the evolution of the Orions beyond just simply
pirates.
the stereotypes, which is really a funny cause for Mike McMahon to take up. Of all the things that could be your thing in Star Trek, every showrunner has their thing that they really like to focus on, their themes. For some reason, he has chosen to plant his flag and die on that hill when it comes to Orions,
Yes.
which I'm not complaining. They've
Yeah.
always been an interesting species. They were introduced in the pilot years ago, and they were never seen again, if memory serves me correct,
Yeah.
until Enterprise. Enterprise had an episode where T'Pol was actually physically picked up and abducted. So for Lower Decks to pick that idea up, the Orions, and just run away with it, it's a fun species because we have never been given a lot. Discovery has also used them a bit,
But
and
it's not their focus.
they've actually taken from Mike McMahon's cues
Yes.
with trying to reframe them a bit, as opposed to just simply being pheromone
Inducing aliens.
secreting aliens that steal and cause chaos amongst male crew members. That's pretty much what they were, streamlined down to in years past. Now they're far more dynamic. All of this from a cartoon, Dave.
Yeah. And that's the thing that if there's every series of Star Trek up to this point always has their one, just like what you said, that thing that they could stick their flag on. And, Discovery has their own way of storytelling that worked for them, and it worked for that show. And like Strange New Worlds, the way they've actually focused on the quote unquote history of the original Star Trek crew. And that's going to be their flag they stick on. And here, Mike McMahon, I love in 5 seasons, Mike, especially in my rewatch, he has taken the most obscure alien races and brought them back front and center so that all the fans go, oh yeah, they're a part of the Star Trek lore, and they are an important part of the galaxy. Like the Pakleds, the Orions are like the. Think about it. In 5 seasons, he has taken the Pakleds, the Breen, the Orions. He's taken pretty much any other species that no one wants to take.
The reject species.
The reject species, and brought them forward and basically said, no, I'm going to take these species and then add to their mythos so that they're updated for essentially the Star Trek galaxy.
I forgot about the Pakleds. Yeah, he did a great
How can
job
you
with
forget?
that too.
The Pakleds are amazing.
David, yes, the Pakleds, what he's done, because they were pretty much a filler episode alien that really, it was a silly episode.
Oh, that's beyond silly. It was almost like, borderline, kind of wrong.
A little offensive.
Offensive.
So guys, when we designed the villains for this episode, and the aliens are going to be called Pakleds, I'm thinking mental retardation.
You beat me to it.
I think that might be the best way to frame these villains. Now, they're not really mentally retarded,
but they are.
They just come off that way. The most offensive way that you mock and mimic and try to what's the word I'm looking for? The most offensive ways that you can mock a person with a mental handicap. Yeah, that's what we want to do with this character, these villains. And I think it's going to really add to the characters themselves.
They're the specials of the galaxy.
Think of mental retardation as a superpower.
Superpower. That's what we want to give the Pakled.
Yeah.
And they greenlit it, but unfortunately, as society goes, then society saw this and said, no, that's wrong. Let's just keep that into the darkness of the Star Trek mythos and never speak of it again. Here comes Mike McMahon going, no. You put it in here. We're putting it front and center. In fact, we're going to make them the villains.
I like going back now and seeing. This is some of my best, or I should say some of my favorite things to do with Star Trek shows, is after they are done, going back and really seeing, like from a bird's eye view, what specific writers and showrunners are doing. Like
during that time frame,
you start to see like certain cycles of themes, patterns of storytelling. Mike McMahon, we're going to look back and we're going to look at Lower Decks, yes, as largely a comedy piece, but also it's doing things that other Star Trek shows have run away from. And I think a lot of that has to do with the comedic element. There's more you can do in terms of addressing some of these problematic species comedically, as opposed to just bringing them back into the universe and changing them in some half-assed way. Rather, what Mike McMahon does is just keeps them exactly as they were introduced, but then further fleshes them out and makes them kind of his own thing. I mean, the fact that the Orions have been shelved
for so long.
because of how problematic it was.
Yeah, I mean, think about
They were a species of aliens that were essentially just women.
yes,
Yes, there were men, but the women were foregrounded, and their only purpose they had was to seduce and manipulate men. So I think most of us can understand why that might be problematic to certain individuals watching, studios that may not want to push some of those ideas forward. Understood. I understand. It's understandable. But then you have Mike McMahon coming in and saying, well, rather than pretending they never existed, let's bring them in, make these aspects part of the joke, and then in doing so, we can rehabilitate these aliens.
That's the word that I like. He knows how to actually rehabilitate these species so that they can make them more, quote unquote, acceptable.
Yeah.
For use.
Yeah.
Because now, if
And
you think about
accessible, meaning we can understand them better.
yeah, and if you think about it, if someone later on were to take on the Orions, they can run with stuff that Mike McMahon has done.
They can almost bypass some of the more problematic aspects and go right into the things that Mike McMahon has already devised.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right, David. It makes it so much easier for other future Star Trek writers to now dip their toes.
And this is one of the reasons why I've always championed Lower Decks, because it's the one show that a lot of the fans can easily get behind, and we can all basically look at the other shows and say, hey, learn to work together. All right. It's A-OK for shows to be working together.
Listen, I've had my problems with Lower Decks. Mostly not because of the writing. I felt like there's times where the show relies too much on the inside joke.
Yeah.
And that you need to know 50 plus years of Star Trek history to get some of the jokes. And I don't feel like that is ever a good strategy to writing your show. You need to make your shows accessible.
Yeah.
And maybe the studio knew something we didn't, meaning no one's going to watch this except Star Trek fans, and they'll probably understand this. But that, again, is not a good strategy to marketing a show. Every new show that comes out, even if it's a spinoff of some big franchise, has to operate and function on its own. Has to. So that's always been my problem with Lower Decks. I feel like if it wasn't filled with a lot of Star Trek Easter eggs and references, I don't know if it would be that funny. And if you remove that, would we even want to watch the show?
Exactly.
And that means, to me, from a writing perspective, you're relying on easy things to keep your people connected and coming back to your show week after week. You're using gimmicks, manipulation. And if that's the show, then understandable. I get it. That's the show. We're 5 years in. This is the final season. I'm not here saying they should change it at this point. It just wasn't always my thing. But that's why I liked these 2 episodes so much, Dave, because honestly, how much of those 2 episodes really relied on anything that came prior, and more relied on its own fucking cosmology.
Exactly. And that's the strength of, like, even the first episode.
This is the first premiere, right, David, that kind of relied pretty much on its own story.
And in regards to the comedic writing, a lot of the jokes were only based on, you know, what
the
has
show
gone
itself.
Narratively in the show, or even in that relate back to the past seasons. That's why at first, when I was watching the premiere, I'm like going, oh, this feels weird. It feels different from any of the other premieres we've gotten from Lower Decks, because I think Mike McMahon has gotten into the groove of basically, okay, I've done, like what you said, I've focused on the Star Trek isms. I'm going to actually just focus on my characters, and what really makes this show shine is the characters.
He can finally use his own history
to actually do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the little jokes in the episode 1 with Rutherford and his
That's so good.
his characterism,
Cyborg.
his cyborgism.
Duplicate. Yeah.
Oh my god, and those jokes work because if you've watched Lower Decks up to this point, those are the jokes that will land. It's not like some obscure reference to a Star Trek character that we haven't seen in 50 plus years that makes us laugh. It's the jokes on the characters and their character growth.
Yeah. I also, because I always got to find something of intellectual worth as well, one component that I really liked about the Rutherford aspect is it's building on something that Star Trek has done a lot throughout the years. I mean, we can go all the way back to the original series, but I'm in the middle of writing about the motion picture, so we'll just use that for an example. Star Trek has always had this, mostly after the original series, when space flight really became a reality, there was an anxiety attached to some of the technological aspects in Star Trek. Look at the motion picture. You're literally talking about the merging of human and artificial intelligence. You're dealing with the 1970s anxiety of the rising fears associated with artificial intelligence and technology outpacing humanity. So Star Trek's always dealt with those types of anxieties using the humanist philosophy, you know, that deals more with the interconnected aspects of the human experience and how much of the human experience is also the negative, and that we shouldn't shun the negative, because the negative, meaning suffering, as morbid as that sounds, suffering's important to growth.
Yeah.
And if we try to relegate the suffering, oftentimes we lose the full experience of being a human being. And that's why with Rutherford choosing to hold on to his humanity and not choose to turn off the emotion by becoming more singular, more, I guess you can say, one with his technology.
Yeah.
He chooses to remain human so he can feel the emotions that he feels with Tendi leaving.
Yeah, because
that is Star Trek 101.
That is Star Trek number one, and it's such a simple little nuanced scene, but it's also very powerful when Rutherford basically, that moment when he basically says, oh, okay, it's okay to erase, I guess you're going to erase the memory of me now. And he basically says, no, I'm going to actually hold on to that memory. And basically the AI Rutherford, who's pretty much 90% cyborg or machine, basically makes that human choice to actually hold on to that human emotion.
Yeah, that's being a human. That's why the moment at the end of Star Trek Generations, you know, the movie that everyone says sucks, when Data cries because he finds Spot. You don't know what human happiness is unless you've experienced human suffering.
Yeah.
That's why suffering is a vital component to the human experience, because how do we know when to be happy? How do we know when to enjoy life, or how to enjoy life, if we also don't know the contrast?
Yeah.
And that's something Star Trek has played with time and time again, specifically when it comes to technology and the ability to either conform via the Borg, lose emotion via the Vulcans. There's always species that they use to talk about not restricting the human condition.
Yes.
Opening it up to possibility. So Lower Decks, once again, in 30-minute episodes, are able to tackle not just the comedy, not just the character, but also those important Star Trek components.
Mm-hmm.
Now, David, when it comes to the Orions, really quick, we're going to backtrack because there's some important canon stuff that Mike McMahon has done yet again. Between Star Trek Discovery and Lower Decks, they have slowly made the Star Trek animated series canon. Because it's technically amazing. Not canon, but they all keep borrowing so much
from the animated show.
They're retrospectively turning the animated series into canon. So with Star Trek Lower Decks and the season 5 premiere, it brought back the blue Orions from Star Trek, the original series. But why do the blue pronounce Orion differently. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 delves into this, sparking a war between the blues and the greens. So the blues pronounce the name Orion, and the green Orions say it properly as Orion. So Orions are among the first aliens ever seen in Star Trek. The Cage, Star Trek's original pilot that was rejected by NBC, which saw the introduction of Christopher Pike. The Orions reappeared in the Star Trek animated series as well, Season 2's The Pirate of Orion. So technically, because The Cage, the original pilot, was rejected, we never even saw the Blue Orions until way later. So the Pirates of Orion from the animated series introduce the blue skin version of this alien species, and they wore, according to this article, the absurd looking green uniforms and headgear. So Orions remained part of Star Trek canon and were occasionally referenced, and when Orions finally returned in Star Trek Enterprise, they were brought back to having the green skin. So many people thought, okay, well, I guess the blue skin is not canon. Nope. Lower Decks brought it back.
Version. They're just a different genus, I guess you could say, of that species.
Now, one seems to be a matriarchy, and the other's a patriarchy.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
If that doesn't represent what's happening in this country currently with the gender wars.
Of course, you know, like the male version of them look utterly stupid. So go figure.
Oh. They got me painted accurately.
I gotta be painted. That's why I was like going. That's what I came to understand after that first episode. Is like, okay, so you added the fact that you brought back the blue Orions, but essentially you're saying that they're a different genus, and all of them are more male oriented. So instead of a matriarchy, they're a patriarchy.
And they're kind of stupid like the Packlets.
And they're just kind of stupid like the Packlets because they're, you know, beefy gym boys, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Like, you're like going, yeah.
Oh man, this show.
When you had to cringe, Mike. I knew you had to cringe when they put the sleeping gas, or no, it wasn't sleeping gas. It was kind of that gas that basically made them all start laughing and giggling.
Yeah,
and I was like going, yeah, they're gym bros. I'm sorry. They're all a bunch
Listen, I wouldn't even fight with the Greens. I'd be like, listen, the women run this place. Please run me.
Please run me.
Please tell me what to do.
You'd be one of the green Orions then. You wouldn't be like one of the blue Orions.
No, I'd be blue. I'd just paint my skin green. I'd be a self-hating blue.
I'd be a self-hating blue.
Okay, so overall, satisfying resolution of character arcs without feeling rushed. We have an expanded understanding of Star Trek lore through humor and character dynamics, evolution of character relationships that actually enrich the comedic elements. As for cons, I really don't think they're even enough or even that important to even voice.
No, I mean,
there wasn't any of those over-the-top perverse comedic elements that I'm just not a fan of for Star Trek.
You did not have Peanut Hamper around.
Thank God. So, David, the premiere was effective, high quality, it worked perfectly, and this being the final season premiere, I'm happy with it. I'm going to give it a 90%. I thought it was a great way to start the final season. David, how about you?
I think it was a really strong way of starting the season because, especially for being the final season, I was really hoping that they would stay the course and actually stay the course and focus in on more of our character stories and character arcs that we've been getting. And in the first episode, they tackled everyone's story arc by, you know, showing us the parallel universes of them. And I love that. Yeah. I love seeing the fact that basically, Mariner is actually a stronger person now. But if she made that little tiny change to herself, she would have not been happy.
We also know what they're capable of now because that
Yeah.
universe was not that different than ours, we now know that they are capable
They are
of
capable of that.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing to me by far is like everyone did not like their parallel universe selves. The only one that liked their parallel universe version of themselves was Boimler.
Yeah.
Because Boimler's story is the fact that he has to get confidence in himself.
It's what he wants to be.
It's what he wants to be. And
Yeah.
apparently it's like he needs to grow a beard. He needs to grow the Riker beard. And like, I like that part of the fact that they took those character elements and then brought it forth again and said, okay, this is what we're going to be focusing on for the season. And my final score for both of the episodes is a 95.
Okay. So, question, Dave. Because the season premiere felt so purposeful, felt like there's a lot of intent there, trying to make sure your characters are in those positions that they need to be in order to finish the season off effectively in just 8 episodes, which is all that's left. It does feel like he probably should mature these characters up a bit. I'm not saying get away or move away from the comedic. You can't. But it would be nice to position these characters in a way by the end that makes us feel like they have, in fact, achieved their purposes, their individual purposes. Mariner has found peace with herself. Boimler has found the confidence
that he needs.
Rutherford and Tendi finally fuck.
Get that cybernetic wang out, Rutherford. He has a third arm coming, Mike.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was disturbing. When that third arm came out, I laughed really fucking hard because it was so weird.
Yeah, I know.
And disturbing.
It was just random third arm just comes out.
I do feel like he needs to do that. He does need to position these characters in a way that the closure that's needed is not that hard to achieve. And it does feel like he actually did that with these 2 episodes. He covered a lot of ground.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right. Is there anything you absolutely want to see by the end? A William Shatner cameo? Will it happen?
You know what? This is the show that I think it should.
If you're going to do it ever again, I'm not a fan of those cameos, as you know. However, if we're ever going to have a chance to see William Shatner reprise his role as Kirk in some way, it has to happen now and in this show.
Absolutely.
He doesn't have to worry about his aging. He doesn't have to worry about the storyline because you can create some scientific shit. It can take place in the Nexus.
It could take place in the Nexus. It could take place in a parallel universe.
Yeah.
God only knows.
You know
what?
That's my only ridiculous, probably not going to get fan want. I usually don't have those, but because this is the final season and I'm going to lean into the fun, that's the one get that I want before the end. I want a William Shatner cameo.
Because like that's the thing that I think is missing out of Lower Decks, because Lower Decks has had, classic Star Trek actors come back to reprise a gag or a joke, at least in a scene. Because they did it the one season when Boimler went to the afterlife and found the actor who plays Sulu, George Takei. George Takei was actually on the farm, so to speak, in the afterlife. That was cool. So I honestly think that basically the last person you would want to see is William Shatner. Because like everyone wants to see William Shatner in like a live action version of Kirk, in Strange New Worlds. I've heard that, or like even like in some kind of live action Star Trek. But I'm like going, no, I'd rather see Kirk at his peak.
Yeah.
I want to see Kirk at his peak, meaning the only way we could see that is if being played by William Shatner is if it's animated or if it's AI driven, which is terrible.
Yeah. So you're up for that then? You're up for a William Shatner cameo?
You beat me to it because I thought about it and I was like, what do I want as a Star Trek fan? And I think it's the William Shatner.
I just feel like a lot of people in the new era of Star Trek, they don't have a lot of respect for William Shatner. I'm not saying they don't have respect for the legacy of Captain Kirk. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
I'm saying they don't seem to have a lot of love for William Shatner.
For William Shatner.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he gives no shits. Not that he is a purposeful, controversial douche, kind of like Chakotay is at conventions. I love the guy, Robert Beltran, so I'm saying douche in a loving way. But he's known for saying a lot of what the hell type of political things.
Yeah.
William Shatner isn't overly political, but he has a very specific worldview. And that worldview is something that was cultivated during the 60s.
Yeah.
The old school liberalism, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And he's kind of still that guy, which is fine.
Yeah, because he's old.
And because he has that worldview isn't as popular with celebrities. We're less classically liberal and more, when I say I'm saying what mainstream media and dominant culture is desperately trying to push us towards. They're trying to push us towards a type of virtue ethics that we live by now.
Yeah, and like William Shatner comes from a generation where virtue ethics do not matter.
It's just too touchy.
Yeah.
Touchy. It's all about the humanist philosophy. If you want to do good for humanity, it's what Star Trek is built on, which is the humanist philosophy. And that's, in a lot of ways, what William Shatner is also about.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he and Roddenberry got along so well.
Strange enough, yeah.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.